Bob Hoopsher, and this is the Gaining Perspective podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with some of the top thought leaders in the investment advisor profession and investment management industry. I am the founder of Advisor Perspectives and a vice chairman of Vetify. As advisors are striving for that truly personal touch with their clients, and how much more personal can you get than eye to eye, there is increased interest in more in person prospecting events. My guest today will discuss how he and his team have unlocked the power of seminars, giving advisors and firms opportunities to make a lasting impression and turn intrigued prospects into clients. And additionally, as people are getting so much spam through their email and on their cell phones, he's also going to share how to gain mind share in a meaningful way. So my guest is Greg Bogich. He is the CEO of White Glove. So Greg, I'm going to have you start out by telling me about your career path. I know it spans multiple industries, but talk about it. What led you to found and run White Glove, and a little bit more about what that business is and what your role is.
I will give you a background, and when I get boring, you stop me. I am probably a little different than many of the guests, Bob, in the respect that my background is truly go to market. And while I have some experience in the financial services, most of my life has really been helping brands, big brands, small brands, getting consumers to engage. So how do I get from a B2B perspective, how do I help them from a B2C perspective? And it's brands that are as diverse as a Procter and Gamble to a McDonald's to an AARP. And I think when you live in my shoes, you realize that all of these marketers have something to teach you. And if you can figure out what all of them do well and learn from, in parentheses, steal from each of them, you can make all of them a little bit better. So, for an example, a Procter and Gamble knows more about consumer and consumer behavior than virtually any company in the world. They're very good at the psychographics and behavioral elements, whereas McDonald's, you know what, they're really good at geography and understanding how to drive somebody to a physical location. And an AARP is really good at what message is going to resonate with their crowd to get them to take action. And with that background in coming to White Glove, I think those are all disciplines that can be applied to what we do, which is in essence getting a consumer to take action, typically going to a seminar or a webinar, engaging, get the right consumers to the right event to take action. That's what I've done most of my life, although not all of it in the financial services industry.
Well, let's talk about some of the trends that you saw last year in 2023, and what do you expect to be leading in terms of driving client engagement, driving prospects into clients? What is the trends that will matter most in 2024?
I believe if you look at trends, and I'm not sure this would classify as a trend, you look at consumer behavior as being kind of first and foremost, because at the end of the day, everything is about engaging and providing benefit to that consumer. So what do they care about? What are they watching? What are they listening to? What media are they engaging with? And you can get that qualitatively and you can get that quantitatively. But I think those are some of the most important metrics, understanding what motivates that consumer to take an action. Are they online? Are they looking at traditional media? What are the things that they are doing that allow me to intercept them at the right time with the right message? Part two is, some of the data we lean heaviest on is our own data. We work with about 3,000 advisors. We ran about 24,000 workshops last year. We engaged with well over 500,000 consumers. And at that point, you kind of understand a number of data points. What do they respond to? What brought them to take some sort of an action, whether that's attending a seminar, getting on a webinar, whatever that action is, what were the motivations? And when you run enough campaigns, you can run the regressions and figure out what drove action. You can also figure out what offers or what were they most interested in by what they responded to. So not only what brought them to listen, but what brought them to take action. So those are data points that we look at pretty regularly, and we have this kind of learn do loop. What's working, what's not. We have a team that huddles every morning, 8 a.m. come rain or shine, that just looks at behavioral elements of what the consumers did and what drove that behavior, and then we refine uh, qualitatively, measure quantitatively, and see what happens. So there's a ton of data points that are inside. I don't know if you'd call those trends. Uh, there's the external trends about what's going on in the marketplace, where media dollars are going, but then there's the internal data that validates the hypotheses by which we drive our business from those consumer trends.
I'm going to ask you about those trends. It's interesting. 3,000 advisors, 24,000 seminars. That's very impressive. What are those? What's the data telling you? What are the hot buttons? What are the key issues that drive someone to attend, a client to attend one of your events?
There are, I mean, almost anybody who's ever read a book on psychology will tell you there are two things that motivate human behavior. One is fear, and the other is the promise of something better, of some sort of promise. And if you think about the world and all the uncertainty, fear is going to be the predominant thing that drives people to take action. The fact that they don't know that they've prepared well enough for their retirement, the fact that they don't know that they've prepared well enough for their kids' college and education. Those are things that I don't know that they've changed a ton over the last 20, 30 years. How you engage those people have changed a ton, but what they care about and what they're listening to and what they're trying to plan for, pretty consistent, to be honest with you.
Wonderful. Well, when you think about responding to those fears, fears about planning for retirement or funding a college education, what are the challenges that you see in the coming year?
I think if you look at the challenges, and I'll address that from our perspective at White Glove and from the advisor's perspective to the consumer, they're going to be the same challenge. They're going to be, how do you engage the consumer? Or how do I engage? Hey, how do I engage an advisor? Because advisors, just like consumers, are inundated with thousands of people whispering in their ear about they've got the next best and greatest solution to help them do whatever. And the same thing with a consumer. Consumer is inundated with more messaging today than they've ever been. So how do you separate the wheat from the chaff? How do you make sure that we resonate with the advisor community because we've got a unique solution that, candidly, one of the reasons I came here is because it works. I know we are delivering value. I know we are driving advisors' businesses forward in a way that in my past lives I couldn't always say that. But then, the advisor has to then communicate that same message to the consumer. And again, that consumer is being inundated with all kinds of messaging. I don't know that the challenge of engagement again has changed all that much over the years, either from a B2B or from a B2C perspective. But that's the biggest challenge. How do you get them engaged? How do you get them to want to talk to you and learn from you?
I'm interested in some of the techniques you've been using. I mean, the conventional wisdom these days in the advisory profession is that seminars are a thing of the past, and that uh, marketing is a very digitally focused enterprise with search engine optimization and all the tools that are available to a digital marketer. How have you been so successful in person events? How is that working for you?
I think if you if you think about how human beings have evolved, they've evolved to be social creatures. Our brains are wired to be social creatures, whether it's Maslow, whether it's Darwin, doesn't matter. We have evolved to want to be social creatures. And COVID changed some people's, perspective of what's old, what's new. We just acquired or merged with a company called Acquire Direct and Lead Jig. And by the way, you will also hear that direct mail is dead and that it's a digital world. Well, I will tell you, being maybe not an average consumer, but I will tell you that virtually every consumer in this country, virtually every household in this country, still goes out to their mailbox every day and sorts through their mail. and makes a decision. Is this something I want to engage with? Is this a bill I need to pay? Or is this something that goes into the garbage? And I would argue pretty strongly that there isn't another medium in the world that has that level of engagement, because it's a physical touch. I have to make a kind of a mindful decision, and then I have to take some sort of an action, whether it's throwing it in the garbage or whether it is putting into the pile of the things I have to follow up with. But you will also hear that, print is dead. Print gets the same response rates it's gotten for the last 30 or 40 years. So, conventional wisdom is can be conventional, but it's not always wisdom.
Tell me about Lead Jig and Acquire Direct. What, how do those businesses complement what you do? What does the merger look like, and what will the combined entity uh, look like in terms of the capabilities that you'll be able to deliver to advisors?
So I'll give you a brief snapshot of White Glove first, so we can kind of compare and contrast, and you can kind of say the yin and the yang. White Glove primarily helps advisors drive top of funnel activity, and we do that primarily through digital advertising. We help drive qualified consumers to events or to webinars. We also have a great product called Nurture and Engage that once they are a customer, or once you have customers, we're going to keep bringing them back to the top of the funnel to take additional action. But the way White Glove works, which is different than any other company in this industry, is we do everything for you. We arrange the venue, we book and arrange the venue. We help coach you on what the content of your presentation should look like. How do you open strong? How do you close strong? And then we only will charge you for the number of households that attend. So it's really a pay per performance. So if you are new to this and you haven't done webinars or seminars, I'm going to take the risk out of the equation for you. Now, if I compare and contrast that to what we have in Acquire Direct and Lead Jig, Acquire Direct and Lead Jig is primarily traditional media. So primarily direct mail, but with a digital overlay. Their business is more suited to folks who have run seminars and webinars, and we can make it markedly more efficient through the targeting by the data points that we have as a combined entity. So you're getting the most bang for your dollar. And that business model has been exceptionally productive. And you marry those two things up, and you have a pay per performance option to get somebody started in this. And then you have, once we can take the training wheels off, we've got a very, very cost effective way for you to continue to drive top of the funnel leads into your business. We do things from top of the funnel, filling leads, to coaching to help you in the middle of the funnel to convert those leads, and then at the bottom end of the funnel, help keep those leads loyal, help you retain them, and help them come back and buy more. So I think the combined entity has really an end-to-end solution for activating consumers that no one else has.
Tell me more about how LeadJig uses its data to help advisors hone in on their audience. Uh, Something you just mentioned. Expand on that.
So LeadJig has basically consumer data on about 300 million households. And when I say consumer data, it's about almost 600 data points on each of those households. So when it comes to targeting them based on demographics or based on behavioral entities or, you know, investable assets, things like that, I have data at our fingertips that are going to make sure I am bringing you qualified prospects. I also have a really good uh, uh, geographic system that allows me to identify the right venue for an advisor in their area, venues that have performed. And I also know how far consumers are willing to travel. So I'm going to make sure I am finding people who are demographically, psychographically qualified, but also geographically qualified to come to your events. And then on the tail end, we have a tool in LeadJig that is going to give you access to that data with more transparency than you're going to get anywhere else in the industry. So, more better data, and then more transparency, and then the ability for you as an advisor to access that data is really the, one of the things that, why this merger makes so much sense and why we came together.
300 million households. Is that global or is that just the United States?
That's US. That's US. And if you think about the US, there are roughly 320 million households in the entire US. So we've got virtually all single family dwellings in there and most multifamily dwellings in there. I would tell you virtually every household that's going to be of interest to a financial advisor.
There was a piece of research that I read last night, and I know you're familiar with it. It was put out by the FPA. It's entitled New Study Reveals Psychological Factors Hindering Growth for Financial Advisors. We'll put a link to that in the notes that accompany this podcast. But it showed that advisors sometimes get in their own way when it comes to prospecting because they don't want to seem too pushy. Tell me about that research. How do you encourage advisors to be the appropriate type of salesperson in their engagements?
So we will work under the assumption that we've got prospect in the room, right? As opposed to, advisors sometimes also try to be marketers. So if we've got the prospect in front of us, what I have seen, and it's not just with financial advisors, it's virtually across the board with any sales professional, is you should always start from a point of empathy. You should always put yourself in that other person's shoes and what do they care about? And you start with a hypothesis. This is what they are here to, this is the benefit they are here to receive. And if you do that and you curtail your content to that message and that value, and you also have to spend a fair amount of time as an advisor quantifying what that value is in your head so you can speak to it thoroughly, as opposed to, I've had a firm, we've been in business for 25 years. I have a wife and two kids. No one cares. They will care eventually once you have a relationship, but they don't care at the onset. So I think there's just a lesson, in the key lesson is empathy for who's in front of you and what they care about. What's in it for them should always be how you start every conversation with somebody you're interested in doing business with.
As a firm does seminars, what have you found to be the keys to success?
I think if you think about any sales funnel, it's first and foremost, how do we target the right consumers? How do we make sure that we are getting the people that the advisor is interested in to attend? Then, question two is how do you engage those folks? Is it online because that's their preference? Is it through the mailbox because that's their preference? What is the best way to engage them when they are interested in taking an action? So there's an element of how frequently do I have to be in front of them, and there's an element in messaging. There's a number of best practices that apply there. Then for seminars specifically, making sure that we have the right location and a location that people are going to be comfortable with, think they can learn from, or a setting that they're going to be comfortable with. And then there's just, what I would call the details. There's making sure you're doing all the confirmations, making sure that you are reaching out to them in advance. Seminars tomorrow, make sure you attend, doing all of those, making sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And then I would tell you the key is the presenter. And we just talked about some of the errors that salespeople can make in presenting poorly. So we've got a whole library of assets to help make sure that the the how you greet is on point, how you open is on point, content that you deliver is on point, and how you close and what follow up looks like is all on point. So making sure you give a killer presentation. It's the one thing I learned in coming into this role 5 months ago. One of the founders here said, look, the difference between a great seminar and a bad one is almost always tied to the presenter. If we get the audience there, it's almost all the presenter. So if the advisors take the time to think about the importance of that step, because it's not always a fun step, and then they can get to the step of the relationship building and the one-on-one that they do find fun and that they do unbelievably well. But understand that conversion is an important part of the job. And one of the good things is White Glove. We know that's important, so we try to help our advisor partners in being better at those presentations.
I'm curious. I get quite a few invitations to uh, seminars put on by advisors, and they usually are a steak dinner at a place like Ruth Chris. Is that what you find works? What do you recommend?
No, I would tell you that it depends on what you're looking for. There's a number of different tactics. We have a lot of very successful seminars where it is a where you're going to go to a public library, and it is going to be it is presented, and a in how we advertise it, and b in how it's delivered, is an educational seminar or educational opportunity, because in those instances, potentially consumers guards down. I would tell you, if you're going to host a dinner seminar, people are going to go there with the expectation of a sales pitch. But if you're doing it right, the pitch either at the library or the Roots Chris in your example would be exactly the same. It's still going to start from a point of empathy. Um, that really is a tactic that's up to the advisor. If they want to present in an environment that is a little bit more educational, or that's what they want their brand to be, that's fine. If they want to promote in a way that's a little more promotional and do a restaurant or some other more eventish type of thing, they both work. They both work.
Let's say I'm an advisor and I'm coming to you for help. Walk me through the process that I will go through to become a client of yours and work with you to put on a seminar. And also, what does it cost? What does White Glove cost?
So this would depend a little bit, Bob. We would likely have a conversation about your comfort with seminars and webinars. And Bob, if you were comfortable with webinars and seminars and you had done them before and you're just exploring options, I would tell you that in addition to a done for you model, we have a done with you model that we're going to enable you to book an event. We're going to tell you where you should book it. We're going to make sure that we put out the advertising to fill the room. Uh, and you're going to be charged up front, and that will be dependent on how many number, the number of households you want at an event. Let's pretend it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, we want 20 to 25 households. It's probably going to cost you in the $3,000 to $3,500 range if you participate in that process. If you are brand new and you need us to hold your hand through the entire process, we will likely have a conversation about topics and subjects that you want to cover or what you are interested in. We will talk about the topics that you should use. We will also book the venue for you that we think is appropriate based on that discovery conversation that we have with you. And in that instance, depending on what the topic is, you'll pay for the number of households that attend, which is a very different model.
If there's one key takeaway that you would like to leave with our audience of advisors about the biggest mistakes that you have seen them make when it comes to marketing, what would it be?
Biggest mistakes is everybody thinks they're a marketer. Everybody, the focus group of one is the biggest mistake. I think this will work because, and marketing is a discipline. It's quantitative and it's qualitative. You know, there used to be a day where people worked on their own cars, but cars got too complicated, so people don't do it anymore. No offense, the human mind and how you drive human behavior is markedly more complicated than any car in the industry, period. But guess what? People feel confident because they don't think of it as a science or a data driven exercise. And my neighbor said this, or I believe that, becomes a default in how a lot of advisors market. And to me, that's an issue. And you start hearing things like what we talked about earlier. Conventional wisdom can creep into somebody's mind, and they can say, oh, you know what, direct mail is dead, or seminars don't work anymore. No, they work wonderfully. They work spectacularly. But that focus group of one can creep into their ears. So I would tell you that is the most common mistake I see in this industry.
Well, wonderful. That's very helpful. And we'll include some links in the notes that accompany this podcast where you will be able to learn more about Greg and White Glove. There'll be a link to White Glove's website, a link to connect with Greg on LinkedIn, and a link to the FBA research that I cited earlier on a study that reveals psychological factors that hinder growth for advisors. Greg, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I want to just say thank you for the time. And if there are any advisors out there, we would love to have a conversation because we think we can help get you better leads, help you convert them better, and help you retain them better. But I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to meet you and have this conversation. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for listening to the Gaining Perspective podcast with Bob Hoopsher, today featuring Greg Bogich of White Glove. To support our podcast, please share, subscribe, or leave a review to help make our podcast more findable for your friends and colleagues. You can subscribe to Gaining Perspective on your favorite podcasting service.